Welcome, everyone. I'm Rabbi Laura Duhan-Kaplan, Dean of Aleph Ordination Program, the Jewish Renewal Seminary. And today I'm here with Yusuf Siraj and Tariq Tyab, who work for, in fact, are the geniuses behind Foundation for a Path Forward. And they will introduce themselves in a moment. But I just want to acknowledge Yosef and Tariq, the terrific work that you are doing in our Metro Vancouver community, and how honored I have been to work with you on the annual Breaking Bread Iftar that fundraises for the Food Bank Network and the annual, or maybe biannual at this point, Serving Our Planet Faith in Action environmental advocacy event, and also some things we've done outside of your regular programming, including the first interfaith peace service for Israel and Palestine after October 7th that happened in our region. So I know that I am only engaged with a fraction of your work. So perhaps you could start with each of you introducing yourselves and telling us a little bit about the work that you do to build multicultural capacity and multi-faith capacity in our community in a time of increasing polarization.
Sure, I can start. So Tariq Tyab, the whole genesis behind working in this field is we realized a lot of folks when it comes to Islam and Muslims, a lot of folks have these perceptions that they've seen in media and social media and in various mediums, which, in my view, being born and raised and being a proud Canadian, I felt that many of these narratives were false or inaccurate. And so part of the work and what we've done and this work that we do with community engagement, so we're the province of British Columbia's first faith community convener for anti-racism initiatives in the province. And then on a global level, we're with the Strong Cities Network as the Canada convener, which is a network of 300 cities across the world. And specifically, the focus is on public safety and countering xenophobia and online harms and misinformation. And so, how our work started, actually, just prior to, was this understanding that people have a misunderstanding, misconception about Islam and Muslims. And so, we convened what we come now to call the whole of society approach, bring all faith leaders, cultural leaders, levels of government, and law enforcement agencies really have a whole of society approach to really have dialogue. And that's what we've been doing for about 10 years. And it culminated with one of the events we hosted where the BC Association of Social Workers said that Islamophobia or anti-Muslim bigotry is mainstream. Every other form of bigotry is frowned upon in their circles, and we thought to ourselves, "Wow, if Islamophobia or anti-Muslim bigotry is a free for all, there's something we got to do. We got to answer the common questions or misconceptions that people have about Islam and Muslims, and dispel false narratives that we see being thrown out there." And to punctuate that event, shortly after it, the first of its kind event, which fueled our work for many years, is the horrific Quebec mosque shootings, January 29th, 2017, where six Muslim men were killed in a mosque in Quebec City and shot in the back by a right-wing extremist, and many other injured and disabled, and many families suffering the aftermath. And the very shocking incident, the first of its kind attack on a place of worship in Canada. And what we saw right across Canada was solidarity. People from every community, Jewish community, Christian community, Sikh community, Black community, Asian community, all communities coming together in solidarities and holding vigils at mosque. And it really made me very proud to be Canadian. And as a result, we felt it was our duty to reach out to people that may not uh, be able to come out to the mosques or to meet us, and go to them and put that hand forward and go to churches, synagogues, and temples and other places to engage communities and answer common questions or misconceptions people might have. And what we learned before I finish this first part is fundamental truths that every community we met with, every racial group, every religious group, one fundamental truth we learned is every community feels their community is the most discriminated against, the most misunderstood, the most marginalized. Every community. And then the other fundamental truth is don't make any assumptions that any community knows anything about your community, your culture, or your religion, and don't assume you know anything about their culture or their tradition. And really having that cultural humility to meet people where they're at and really answer what you might think are very simple questions, but people don't know what they don't know. And that's the other fundamental truth is people don't know what they don't know. And it behooves us to reach out, meet one another. And sometimes you have to be the one leading with the hand to find that common ground. So I'll stop there. And if Yusuf would like to add anything else.
That's a
Uh,
very powerful and inspirational intro. And sorry, Yusuf, over to you, please.
thank you, Rabbi Laura. And again, I think that beautifully encapsulates our work and kind of the reasons why we are doing it. But yeah, it's an honor to be on the podcast or the interview. My name is Yusuf Siraj, and really appreciated the many years of work that we've done together, benefiting our communities, Canada, as well as really trying to build broader understanding in a meaningful and sustainable sense. A lot of that is really put to the test during these global conflicts that have these real world local harms. And one of the things that we really like to, emphasize is that the relationships that you do invest in beyond superficial layers really can stand up to conflicts overseas or even conflicts here in Canada. Because we all start to see each other in a humanized way, even if we might disagree with perspectives or priorities. And really, I think our relationship really emphasizes and illustrates that for folks.
Yeah, thank you. You really underscore, both of you, how important it is to not just rely on stereotypes that we glean from afar or third hand, but how important it is to know people face to face. And you do that work on a lot of levels, and all your large events facilitate the gatherings for people to do that in a way that is safe and supported. I really appreciate that. You talked about how important it is to do the multicultural work to dispel stereotypes. Might you also talk a little bit about the spirituality of that work? Is there something in the Quran or in your sense of yourselves as spiritual people that also supports and encourages you to do that?
Sure, absolutely. Uh, so I grew up very secular and not very religious per se, and we weren't a religious family. And it wasn't until I was 25 years old that I started to, I worked in the financial markets, but I had kind of like an early midlife crisis where I felt like I was missing something, went into a bit of a deep depression, and I started looking towards my faith as something to turn towards. And I started reading about it, and I was like, hey, King David, Solomon, Moses, Abraham, Prophet Muhammad, Jesus, many of these people that I kind of knew a little bit about, but not really, I started to learn about. And I started to become inspired by those stories. And then, oh, there's similarities in Judaism. There's similarity in Christianity. There's similar common values and stories and lessons that inspired. And one of those stories is is really caring for humanity, caring for your neighbor. And so the neighbor, the rights of the neighbor in the Islamic faith, it's in one narration, it's 70 neighbors to the right, to the left, to the north, to the south, like a responsibility for your neighbor. And the fact is, our Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, in the Council of Medina was an interfaith council. So Jews, Muslims, Christians, pagans coming together for the governance of the city. And so, from a prophetic tradition, following that, and everyone's treated equally according to their standing and whatever their religious practices are, they follow their religious practice, and there's no compulsion for somebody to follow anyone else's religious practice. And that's something that we believe in, that we're all equal, and that everyone is in our view is equal. And even though we believe different things and we come from different countries and different backgrounds and different religions, but we can come together with a shared humanity. And so part of our Islamic faith is really embodying that, and caring for our country, caring for our city, and caring for the fact that if people are hating one another or disliking one another or wanting to harm each other, it's our job to repair that. And to start that is you have to build the relationship, and it takes time. And over 10 years, some relationships initially started with some apprehension, maybe, what is the agenda? What do these folks want? And then after 10 years of working together in mutual solidarity, we there's a trust that builds, because we know what is the goal is strengthening our society where we're at. We can't control what's happening around the world. We can barely control what's happening, in our own lives sometimes. But if we can be the best version of ourselves to help our community, that's a great service we can do to our city and our country. So it is fueled for sure by our faith, and we're proud to say it's our faith that fuels this work, and we believe it's part and parcel of our faith. And because being born and raised in Canada, I do understand. Growing up in the 1980s, I believed all the negative stereotypes about Russia and communism and all that sort of thing. And if I believed that then, and then with all this rhetoric in the news, the mainstream news, and now social media about Islam and Muslims, by and large, in a very negative way, the assumption, which largely is found to be true, a lot of people start to believe these things. And so, one last fact I'll leave you with: there's a group called ISPU, the Institute of Social Policy Understanding, which states that if two groups or two different type of cultures or religious individuals from different backgrounds come together and they have a meeting, they break bread, it brings down walls of hate and discrimination by 50% by just sitting together as human beings and having dialogue and getting to know one another. Brings it down by 50%. So I'll leave it at that and turn it over to you.
Thanks. Yusuf, do you want to add back to the grounded in that question about spirituality and faith?
Yeah, I think Tark encapsulated our feelings on it very clearly. As people of faith, one of the things I think, especially in a secular modern time, is it's difficult to for a lot of people maybe relate how faith plays such a motivational part in the work that we're doing. And one of the opportunities we take, particularly through our formal role as the first faith community convener for anti-racism in BC, is to help normalize language around that, especially that is within the context of our Canadian multiculturalism, which is a pretty unique experience historically. So for us, when we think about in our case, like Islam, how does that lead towards treating others, sacrificing, building a better world and a better future? Well, we have 1400 years of history directly from that. And then we also share the history of the Christian world and the Jewish world, right? Islam is an Abrahamic faith. So within that monotheistic tradition, going back 4 or 5,000 years. And, there's a lot of great ideas to glean from, some things that maybe worked well, but no longer are needed. But there's a lot of great stuff there.
Yeah, thank you. And I know that we have talked in the past about how important it is, even when really difficult global events are going on that do affect us personally. But we've talked about how important it is to set aside some of those differences, different opinions, different political orientations, different griefs and angers, and focus on what are the needs in our local community and work on those together. And in light of that, I wanted to ask each of you, how has your work in and with Jewish communities changed since October 7th, Israel's response, and the continuing violent battering of people.
So, as we are Muslims, and my background is South Asian, so from India, Pakistan origin, and so I'll just point to a story. In grade 10, it was the first Iraq War, and in the drumbeat to war, all this negative aspect or propaganda against the country of Iraq, et cetera, et cetera. And in the social studies class in grade 10, our teacher posed a question: who's for this war and who's against? And everyone put their hand up for the war, and I was the only one against. And what happened was I realized I could see the humanity of the people that were going to be bombed, the men, the women, the children, the elderly. And so I realized, wow, people have a different perspective than I do. So that was now leading into what happened October 7th. Uh, uh, you know, the horrific events of what happened to the festival goers, and then the subsequent bombardment of Gaza and the destruction of Gaza, and the 70,000 people that have been killed, that thus far have been counted. It's been very traumatic for me, very traumatic for me, because I could see my kids, I could see my wife, my family in the videos I see. And what we realize in this modern age, in this social media world, is because of the algorithms. Usually, most people become siloed to their viewpoint, their religion, their culture, their race, and they only see the content reflecting their interest or their commonality, and they won't necessarily see the humanity of the other communities and the other affected folks. And so what we realized is that not only are people in their real world silos, they're in their cultural silo, their religious silo, they're not really seeing each other on a human level in person, let alone online, when the content that we receive online is curated for our taste, and then it actually helps strengthen biases and strengthen prejudices against another community, because the algorithm will keep showing you just one side of the equation, and you literally have to break out of your even social media bubble and silo to see the other side of the story. And it becomes very difficult. And so we have a term: we can agree to disagree on perspectives, because people have such heightened emotions when it comes to this. And so we refer to something called the anger arousal cycle. And I'll just briefly give you what that is. So right now we're at baseline, but as soon as a trigger happens, somebody says something or does something, and your anger is triggered, now you're going up the arousal cycle, which is kind of like a roller coaster. And when you're at the highest level of anger, you're at the lowest quality of judgment. And after that anger is expressed, then you go below baseline, and then it takes a while to recover and come back up to baseline. And some of us go through that cycle many times in a day, reading the news, watching social media, watching certain personal stories of people affected that we're connected to, and it creates this traumatic effect where people can easily devolve into a state of us and them, black and white. And when they're at a heightened state of anger, it becomes that stage. It's us and them. It's black and white. We're right, they're wrong. And by doing this work, we can understand each other's perspective, have discussion in person, and then there are situations where we've had to disagree completely with the other person's perspective, but not necessarily devolving into acrimony or hate.
I know that.
I will.
Go
Yeah.
ahead.
No, please, please.
Oh, and maybe what you have to say can also respond to what I'm about to say, but I have learned that when you get aroused into a fight or flight mode, um, after you have assessed the danger and responded to it, it takes at least 20 minutes, right, for the nervous system to calm down. But what happens when people are online is there is no 20 minutes. It's just the adrenaline, the adrenaline, the adrenaline, the adrenaline. And then there's nobody to talk to except the comment section.
Yeah.
What do
And
you do
then
with it?
maybe even the section could be AI and other things. So it becomes like a lot of misinformation is actually sometimes not even real humans anymore. It's AI generated by certain folks that want to create division, and so the discord. So that is another issue we're facing.
Yeah, and Yusuf, over to you.
Well, thank you, Rabbi Laura, and picking up on what Tariq was saying, the relationship and the engagement with Jewish organizations and communities. I mean, it's increased. The work has actually increased, but oddly enough, my invitations to Shabbat dinners have somewhat decreased. Not too much, but it's noticeable. So there's obviously, a lot going on. One of the things that is really important to just highlight, and I think it cuts to the issue here. It's not the sides. It's not even the disagreements. It's the dehumanization. And I'll give an example for the folks in the class to think about is imagine if, and you probably don't have to imagine, maybe even in your own class, you have people who are part of your community but have different views. And it could be that some, view what happened in Gaza as an extremely necessary, although unfortunate, act of self-defense, or those who see it as a pre-planned genocide that used October 7th as an excuse, right? So two extreme examples. But because they're from your community, you won't necessarily dehumanize the person to wish death upon them, right? And destruction of their family and the end to their religion and the end to their culture. But if that person who holds the exact same views was from a different community or a different culture or a different religion, it opens up a pathway to dehumanization. And that's both sides. I never mentioned Muslim, Arab, Jewish, Israeli at all, like as just the human
Or,
being.
or Christian,
So
or Christian.
Christians in Palestine. So we try and look at what is that mechanism of dehumanization that allows for violence, that allows for hatred, that allows for horrible things to be done to people, and how do we combat that, right? Whether it's the internal biases, the psychological effects, the lack of connection in terms of relationships and human engagement, the difficulty in understanding or seeing the ourselves in others who look different or speak differently or sound differently, and how that mechanism really affects people's view of this conflict. And to be honest, all conflicts, right? This is, whether it was the Rwandan genocide or whether it's the war in Ukraine and Russia, like it's that aspect of violence towards others is a human difficulty across the world, and which also helps us to remember that this conflict is not so unique that it's divorced from broader human challenges, nor is it like just a general kind of everyday thing. It is a real problem. So within the work that we do to humanize each other, to understand each other, it actually is the path forward for resolving this. Whether you get to a place where you can have truth and reconciliation, or whether you have political solutions, or whether you have just enough time passes, maybe a couple more thousand years, and that people just can move on, like whatever the issue may be, the core element is the humanization of other people. And then we can talk about our major disagreements, our historical problem, whatever case it is, right? There's, entire university departments dedicated to conflict resolution, and they can articulate it better. But what we like to do is that humanization. Every program we have, and you've been to them, you'll see it. That's what we touch on. How do we humanize people who are different than us? How do we humanize ourselves to others?
Yes, and you also really focus on what are our shared concerns so we can see the ways that we are all in this together. Everybody wants to feed the hungry. Everybody, at least who is engaged with environmentalism and ecology, wants to change the way that they serve the planet. So there's no question about these things. Everybody from every tradition wants to combat online hate and find ways to keep their youth safe from it. So you go out of your way to choose the issues on which everybody does have a shared stake. And I really appreciate that.
It
And
brings intra-group efficacy, right? So that's why, because when you're, if you, a great example is for those who have siblings, and or friends when you were younger, and you had to play board games, and board games that had teams. And if you were on one team, you suddenly hated the other team, even though your siblings, friends, whatever, kid, like it doesn't matter. Like you develop this I want to beat them, I want to defeat them, I want to win, and you tend to like your people. So how we see it is with the intra communal efficacy building. Shared goals allow us to see each other as being on the same team, at least for this one issue. And if you can build successes on one issue, let's say like a classic example is we all live in one apartment building and it's on fire, right? We might never talk to our neighbors, but we all have a shared stake in putting out that fire because it'll spread from apartment to apartment to apartment. And doing that, you get to meet the people you're passing the water bucket to. You get to know folk. You know what I mean? Like you can start to build actual human relationships. And you can, and your class can look at the statistics of engagements in conflict zones. It never starts that the conflict happens when there's high levels of intracommunal relationships, understanding, integration, friendships. It's always when things become isolated and polarized as a step towards dehumanization.
Yeah, thank you. These are profound insights. And Yusuf, you just gave the example of an emergency where people are pulling together. But I think the focus on humanization also reminds us how important it is to act before there is an emergency and to build capacity in times when it's easier and there is peace. And then you have those personal relationships with the people around you. One of our other interviewees talked about how in times of stress, people from some organizations say to them, listen, because of what your organization stands for and what our organization stands for, I can't do any collaborative events with you, but we are still friends and we can still do what we can together outside of our organizational capacity.
We've seen that too. I think that's just a bit of, real politic there. That's the realities of doing business within organizations that have stakeholders, funders, beneficiaries, a public awareness. Even when we do intercommunal work, we usually operate in layers depending on what the situation calls for. So there's a layer with community leadership. No phones, no social media, just meet in a room, let's talk. You can get a lot done effectively, especially around shared concerns, community safety, pathways to, addressing any specific challenges, things like that. Then you get to the organizational level where you can work on food banks, you can work on, challenges that there's key areas where it makes sense, or you can mutually respectfully just take a pause. Like, I mean, even in relationships, sometimes the best thing is to just, not disengage, but not necessarily be in the same room all the time. You can take a pause. And then at the community level, which is sometimes, and actually we do this so much now that I think we're going to add a fourth layer, which is the online world, because it influences everything else, even though we're not completely sure how real it actually is in terms of human beings, but the influence it has is real. So within all these different layers, there's different strategies and metrics. And the assumption that people are inherently good is something we do believe in. We do follow that. When we do the Islamophobia trainings and people bring up one of the pillars of Islamophobia, which is that Islam is an inherently violent religion. One mind exercise we give people is like, well, let's think about it this way. There's 2 billion Muslims in the world, and you can go weeks without there being a headline of there being any violence by a Muslim. And then you have an event, and then the media kind of like picks on and pays attention. I would think if the religion was making everyone violent, you would have a much higher increase. So to give people context, to reframe how they think about things, to look at it in different ways, because a lot of what we see and engage with, particularly through the media lenses and social media included, is warped. It's very warped. And as you were saying, like the good times, what do you do in the good times? Well, you build friendships, you build understanding, you build relationships. There's a lot of positive efforts that can be done, and whether it's using historical examples as basis for cooperation, contemporary examples, or because obviously we're people of faith, religious examples. And I think those are probably our strongest tools. The use of religion for peace building is much stronger than people seeking to hijack it for political or violent ends, even though they get most of the attention.
I love the way you have a variety of strategies here at your fingertips. There are the intellectual strategies for the thinkers. Think about the statistics. Think about it this way. Make this analogy. And then there are the interpersonal opportunities to meet and greet and work together for people who are more heart-centered or person-centered. And then there are the spiritual resources for people who are deep in their faith traditions or in spirituality traditions. So that I don't want to be hard on myself, but one of the messages I get is there's no excuse for not trying because there are so many different strategies, right, to reduce hate and friction.
There are, and again, it's this concept that others are so different than us, and inherently threats, and inherently um, not deserving of resources or acceptance, or it's just crazy stuff. Whereas when we really break down the shared humanity that we have, particularly within our faith traditions, like the dehumanization is counter-religious. It really is. And I think what happens is this is not to say that disagreements are no disagreements are fine, right? You can have very fundamental disagreements, but to understand that those disagreements live within another human being who has equal value in terms of the eyes of the creator, right? Like, I mean, independent of their actions in life, like they'll be judged for those things, right? Fair enough. Everyone will be judged, but like at least within the Islamic eschatological tradition, right? Like we do believe in the day of judgment. So when you look at the value of a human life, and similar within the Torah, and then therefore in the Gospel and the Bible and then the Quran, if you take one human life, if you kill one human life, or if you save one human life, it's as if you have done the same thing to all of humanity, right? And I think that becomes such a quoted thing without really thinking about what that means. Um, and I would encourage all of us to really ponder upon that. Our relationship with the Creator is the center of our willingness to sacrifice for peace, for humanity, for moving past our own kind of I don't know, like myopic worldviews, right? And I think whenever people think that, and we always hold ourselves to this too, if we think that we're somehow better than others, and that our thing is, then that's a major red flag and a risk area. And I would say that an element of this work in particular is humility, whether it's cultural humility, intellectual humility, or just understanding, as Tark said in the beginning, that many people, including ourselves, we just don't know what we don't know. And the only way to really find out is to go and meet other people and to engage and understand, and then have a great time, right? Because people are cool. Cultures they're cool. You learn a lot of different things. Yeah. So there's a lot of great things out there and good people. It's just yeah, unfortunate that things are always misused for the those in power, or what doesn't matter where or what stripe.
Yes. And to riff off something you said a few thoughts ago, there's a wonderful passage in the Talmud in Jewish tradition, Talmud, the great book of Jewish law and lore from the 6th century. There's a dispute between two of our sages. Rabbi Akiva says the most important teaching in the entire Torah is love your neighbor as yourself. And Ben Azai, another sage, says, no, there's something even more important than love your neighbor as yourself, which is, after all, pretty complicated because not everybody loves themselves to begin with. And that teaching is these are the generations of Adam, meaning the most fundamental teaching that we all need to recognize is that all of us, all human beings around the globe, are part of the same family. Now, of course, in real life, family is fraught, but family are also the people that you are stuck traveling with. And so there's an urgency to figure things out to live together. And I love that Ben Azai says that is the most important teaching in our entire tradition. There's one human family, and there's an urgency to learn how to get along.
Wow. No, It is. It really is. I mean, I think there's a lot of value in learning from each other, and uh, for me, I think my favorite quote, and I might butcher this, but from the Talmud is Rabbi Tarfon, I think his name was, that the day is short, the work is plentiful, and the effort, the laborers are lazy, but the reward is great, and the master of the house is insisting, he's waiting. So in the work we do, right? It's like there's an urgency, right? We have to reach out to others. We cannot pass um, the momentum to the forces who are an extreme minority of trying to divide, to dehumanize, to hate, but who control levers of power globally, right? And this is not just any one community or group. This is a unique thing to power structures, right? Like the people who love their creator, the people who love their planet, the people who love their neighbors, the people who love their traditions and who love each other, right? Those are the people we should really help uplift and connect, because the worst thing is for us to be siloed. The worst thing. And just forgive people, right? Forgive people who've made mistakes, forgive people, I mean, there's levels of this, right? Obviously, there's people who justice must be served, but like just try and be more forgiving and more humble in the work that you're doing, and it'll take you a long way.
Yeah, thank you. I want to be mindful of your time. So I want to ask you, Yusuf, and you, Tariq, if you're available to answer. And really, this is just a gathering and a gleaning from what you've already said. But where do you find hope and where do you create hope in this work?
Well, there's many ways, and maybe I'll answer first. First of all, I'm blessed with a great colleague like Tariq. We sync, we great have similar visions, and I'd say saying having partners in life who you can really work on meaningful work with matters. I would say having that meaning, like Viktor Frankl's book, right? We search for meaning as human beings. It's such a fundamental part of it, or even like in Maslow's hierarchy, even though I think the Blackfoot or the Cree who he took it from had it upside down. It's like we start as fully self-actualized people, and then everything builds from there, right? So, like having purpose in life, and that purpose has to be beyond ourselves and our own material aims or gains or whatever that is, right? That's the first thing. The second thing I would say that is very powerful is the connection with a tradition, in whether it's your faith tradition, your cultural tradition, to love who you are, where you came from, even if you choose to evolve beyond that. But there is this one of the crises of modernity, right, especially postmodern thought, is this abandonment of any value or any connection or any meaning beyond even like hedonistic perspective. Like there's nothing. That is a horrible place for us to be, because it doesn't allow us to judge right and wrong. It doesn't allow us to have purpose. It doesn't allow us to really have true connections, right? Just to kind of criticize some of the even maybe people aren't conscious or even know about this, but these are things that influence our world today that never really existed in the past. So to have that connection with our tradition, like as Tark mentioned, he's originally from the Indian subcontinent. His ancestors came from India, and then Pakistan through the partition, and then my ancestors from my dad's side are from Egypt, and then from my mom's side are French Canadian, right? So you know, wonderful world cultures, enjoy the best of them, but we're Canadian. We're born here. So, you love who you are, where you came from, but you can evolve beyond it. And that's, I think, one thing we'd encourage folks to really ground themselves in, because if you don't have some sort of grounding, it really, the winds of the world will kind of push you hither and thither just too easily. And then I would say, relevant to this interview and what your students have dedicated their lives to, is that search for the creator, right? That search for truth, that search for what is all of this, right? I was having a discussion with a friend who was convinced we live in a simulation, and I was like, that's not new, buddy. People have been saying this is a dream world for thousands of years, right? That this is beyond the veil, that this is like this. It's just a new word for a similar meaning. And even if it is a simulation, it still requires this to be hosted on a computer somewhere in a physical reality that would still go back to all the problems that we're talking about. Who is the creator? What is all of this? Where do we come from? And to love that journey, and to be humble enough to accept that we will in this life never have that's why the veils are lifted after, right? So to be humble and kind to others who are also on that journey. So that these all give motivation, and then not just because we're on this, but being with people like yourself, Rabbi Laura, like honestly, like good-hearted people who care about others, who are willing to go outside their comfort zone, who are willing to share and to give and to sacrifice, to really build bonds, to build bridges, to build understanding. It's beautiful. And for every time we see one, thing that goes like, oh man, that's a crazy, what kind of world is this? You get 99 for people who are building a better world. And I would say try and surround yourself with good people. Especially surround yourself with good people who you might have disagreements with on fundamental things, and still be friends and still understand things and still move forward. So I'd say those are four key areas.
Thank you,
You're
Tariq.
welcome.
Thank you. I'm actually in the car. That's why I'm not on screen, just on our way to Friday prayers, which is our Sabbath. So Friday afternoon. But what gives me hope is shared commonalities. And I think too much of the world focuses on differences and what the differences are. However, there's more in common with shared humanity and more in common with shared faith traditions and shared faith beliefs than we're led to believe. And that's what gives me hope is when we do this direct engagement directly with communities, we see each other and we see the humanity in each other and the goodness in each other. And the voices that unfortunately get all the attention are the loud voices, and the decision makers in the world are a fraction of the world minority. The vast majority of people globally are good people. Doesn't matter what religion or background. However, certain leaders literally create this situation where the differences are emphasized, the commonalities are not referenced at all, and there's no middle ground. It's a all or nothing, black and white, us and them. And what gives me hope is to be part of the force of good. And the last story is about a person after they were walking on the beach and they saw all these starfish that were kind of washed up on the shore, and they were dying from exposure. And the person, as he's walking down the beach, he starts throwing the starfish back into the pardon me, this is my car backing up, starts to throwing the starfish back in the ocean. And then somebody said, hey, there's thousands of starfish here, aren't you just wasting your time? And uh and then the man threw one more starfish into the ocean. He said, well, it mattered to that one. And so we may not be able to you know, on a scale of billions of people, but heart to heart, it's not scalable. But that's where we can affect change in the scope and where we are, what city we live in, what neighborhood we live in, and we do our part, local to global and global to local.
So, just to summarize, we create the hope by finding partners, by finding purpose, by knowing and appreciating where we came from, by having a sense of where we're going, by searching for meaning, whether it's spiritual or interpersonal meaning, and by doing our best to have faith that our work makes a difference. So I really, really appreciate both of your time.
Thank you.
Well, thank you,
And
So,
Laura.
oh,
and
last question. Are there any other fantastic initiatives that you are about to launch?
So we talked about it just before we started, the Children of Abraham interfaith series, where Jewish leaders, Muslim leaders, Christian leaders can talk about their faith perspective from the messengers and their prophets. And in Islam, prophets like Moses is the most referenced prophet in the Quran, more than the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, which was 4 times. And King David and Abraham and many others are referenced. And so we're excited to kind of share from our perspective and hear from the Jewish and Christian perspectives. And we think it'll be a powerful a powerful dialogue, and we invite you to be the speaker from the Jewish community to speak about our venerated prophets from the Jewish tradition.
I would love to. We'll follow up
Fantastic.
later.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. And actually, there's one other event. I know there's just one more thing. So next year's Breaking Bread Building Bonds, we're taking inspiration from Colorado Springs, which was voted the most neighborly city in the United States. And so they have a 1,000 Neighbors initiative, which is a way to bring communities together in harmony and understanding. So it's not just community leaders, but this is the regular folks, regular people coming together and breaking bread and getting to know one another.
Sounds fantastic.
Awesome.
And hopefully after this, those Shabbat dinner invites might go up a couple. So, but thank you, Rabbi Laura, for everything.
Thanks so much to both of you. We really
Thank you.
appreciate it.
Take care. Bye now.
Thank you.